Have a seat. One of the things that's been happening in our church over the past few months to a year is we're really sharpening down on who we are and what we do and what we try to accomplish as a church. And one of the things that has become apparent is we have a platform that most places, most churches don't have. And if God gives you something, He doesn't give you something so you can have it. He gives it so you can use it. And if God gives you a platform, He also gives you responsibility. And so we started saying, okay, how can we as Spout Springs Church start making a bigger impact in Spout Springs community? And how can we make it a better place for people to live and work and go about their business? And so we started looking at what are some things that are problematic nationwide, and how can we make it so that those aren't as big a problem here, or how can we improve the situation here? And one of the areas that pops to mind immediately, because it seems like it's on the news every 30 seconds, is the interaction between law enforcement and minority community people. And my basic premise is 99% of the people are just basic, decent, law-abiding citizens, and 90% of the legal people are basic, decent, reasonable human beings. How do we make it so that it's better? We're not going to worry about the knuckleheads. We can't fix them real fast. But we can make it better for everybody else. And so we had a conversation in November where we brought in a very diverse group, and we had a conversation about what it's like to live in America as a member of a minority group and all that. And then we thought, well, what if we have another conversation where we bring in some law enforcement personnel and some other people, and we have a brief conversation right here on Sunday morning. And we're just going to talk about, we got some scenarios lined up we're going to talk about, and we want you to get a chance to hear the conversation. And again, to make our community better place. Okay, so we've got Sheriff Coates is here with us, and it's Armstrong, right? I always want to say Anderson. I don't know why I want to say Captain Armstrong, and we've got a couple of other people. And you wanted to say something first again, or?
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate Spout Springs Church having our department here, which is your department, to interact in its good community policing, which is greatly needed. But before I get started, I always like to start out because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it weren't for my Lord and Savior. I'm a man of faith, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, but it's not because I'm sheriff, but because of the man that I wanted to become, and something my father instilled in me in an early age. So with that said, I got a little long-winded in the first session, so I'm not going to get that long-winded this time. But I did want to introduce some of the Sheriff's Department members here that you'll be able to talk with afterwards. Sergeant Aaron Meredith, if you'd stand up, please. Sergeant Jeremy Roberts, Deputy Clayton Williams, and, of course, Captain Armstrong. But we love Harnett County. We love the citizens here at Harnett County. We got good people in Harnett County. And if we can ever do anything to help you in any way, please feel free to call us, no matter how small something may seem. We don't live in a society like we used to live years ago. So I ask you, please get involved with your neighborhood, your neighbors, the Sheriff's Department, because we're here to help and serve y'all. I've been a little under the weather, so Captain Armstrong was going to do probably a little more talking than me, but I did want you to meet Wayne Coates and know a little bit about him, and thank y'all so much for having us here.
Sure. And then the rest of our panel are a couple of members of our church. Thomas, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Thomas Fox. I'm a AGR Army Reserve here, signed here at Fort Bragg. I've been attending for just about a year with my wife, and I have my two of my kids here, Thomas and Latika.
Okay. And Thomas is also, just so you know, our newest elder is Thomas, so it's like that. And you sort of know Jose.
And I'm me.
And he's Jose. And what we've done is, we're not going to be taking questions from the group. There's not time for that. We just came up with a couple of scenarios that we think are really helpful and informative, and they went great first service, and we think we'll do it again this time. So just going to have some discussion on some scenarios. And the first scenario is, Thomas, you're driving home from work. Not sure that you don't even know that you're doing anything wrong, but you may be. and the blue lights flash in the back, and Captain Armstrong, you're the one in the car behind him. And what can each of you do to make this a place, an encounter that is safe for both parties and dignified for both parties? Neither person feels a loss of dignity because of the exchange. So go ahead and just start giving your thoughts on how that can happen, how can make that better.
Right. So any of you that have watched the news in the recent past has seen the violence as it relates to law enforcement, despite the interaction. And so with that violence and with that on the front edge of our minds, not only with you, but with law enforcement officers, because we watch the same news programs y'all watch, and we get safety bulletins and things that come out making us aware of these things. What's changed from even 10 years ago is kind of the idea of the way cold stops are done, and that's essentially what this is where I'm stopping him for a minor traffic violation, but I have no idea who this individual is, what he's doing, where he's going, where he's coming from, what he's involved with. If I were to panel y'all and say that when somebody stops you as a law enforcement officer and they come up to the window, generally what are they going to ask you for? Driver's license and registration. And that's typically what's going to happen. And if you're like me and not thinking, when the blue lights come on, the first thing that goes in your mind is like, my goodness, where am I going to park? And you identify and you scan and you find a safe place to park and you pull over, and the first thing you do is you're going over to your purse or the center console or the glove box to get the registration, or you're leaning over and getting your wallet out to get your driver's license, or the diaper bag is in the back seat and you're all over here like this. And to you, you know what you're doing. But to me, I have no clue. And with the way that things are portrayed and the amount of violence that's, happening, I could perceive that as a threat. And so one thing that I could recommend to each of you that are driving, wait till the officer comes up before you start getting your documents, and engage in that officer in a way that it's not confrontational, but just let the officer know, listen, sir or ma'am, my driver's license are in the back seat or in the trunk, or I've got to get the stuff out of the glove box. And as long as you convey that and the officer knows and there's no surprise and he can see your hands that are empty, that has nothing in there that's going to hurt the officer, that's going to go a whole lot better for both parties.
Yeah, so for me, as a man of faith, one of the first things I want to do when I have that situation is that I want to pray. I want to pray for my safety, but I also want to pray for that officer's safety, because I realize that he or she does not know me and they don't know what my background or what my intent is. And so in that same vein, I want to be empathetic, because I realize that officer has a very, very dangerous job. And the fact that they don't know my intentions, they are trying to do the same thing I do, and that's to make it home safely. Another thing that I think is being respectful. With my military background and the way I was brought up, that comes natural for me. But I'm going to address that officer with yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It comes natural. And I think it sets the proper tone for that interaction. The other thing I want to do is remain calm. And I say that because regardless of the way that officer treats me, I need to maintain my calm, and I want to do that. I think that's extremely important. And I want to avoid being defensive regardless of the way that officer addresses me. And one of the things that I would hope that officer does is that I also hope that they'll pray about the situation, that God would watch over them and watch over the person that they're stopping. And I think respect on that vein goes the same way. It is very important that they treat the person that they're stopping with respect. And then I think one of the most critical pieces that is open communications. One of the things that puts people on the defensive a lot of times is that if they ask the officer, well, what's going on, what was I stopped for, if the officer fails to answer that question, automatically I'm starting to wonder, did I really do something wrong, or is he just looking to find something? And it is also, it's important to realize that if I ask that question, I'm not questioning your authority. I just want to understand what the situation is. And then also, I think it's very critical for the officer to not be antagonistic. And what I mean by that is just some of the questions that are asked at times, asking me, what am I doing in this neighborhood? Or asking me, whose car am I driving, as if I look like I can't afford to drive the vehicle that I'm driving. So I think those are things that are very important as well.
And so just to follow up on that, some of the things that he's pointed out are key. Communication. And I really think that's the nuts and bolts of this, is at the heart of it is the communication. And, the officer is going to come up to the car, and they're going to identify themselves, and they are going to explain the purpose of the stop, unless there is some critical safety issue that he has to address beforehand, such as you forgot that, we're not supposed to be reaching back here to the diaper bag or whatever. He's going to address that issue first, because his ultimate goal is the same goal as yours. That's to go home each night to your family safely. And so, some of the other things that, Mr. Cox has said is very important as well. The insightful, or what was the word you used? Aggravated language, antagonistic verbiage. We're all people, and it's not a matter of what you say. Oftentimes, it's how you say it or the delivery, and we recognize that, and we're people, and that's certainly something that we have to work towards. One of the biggest things is how frustrating is it when you get stopped on the side of the road and the lawman says, "Do you know why I stopped you?" And immediately, what does that say? Well, no, you know why I stopped you. And so I recognize that. And so, is it a poor choice of words? Absolutely. And so we can do a better job in that as well. The biggest thing, though, is talking about dignity and how both can remain dignified. I will explain this the best way possible. Comply now and complain later. If you feel that there's a misconduct, or you were treated disrespectfully, or you were talked to unprofessionally, or any banner of those, please let us know. I implore it. We cannot fix a problem if we do not know what the problem is, and if it's never brought to light. And if it happens and you say, well, I should complain, but I don't have time for it, well, then the officer doesn't know maybe that what he's done is wrong, or she's done is wrong. And so it happens to the next person and the next person. And that's not what we want. We want to provide you with the most professional service possible. So when those things happen, please let us know so that we can identify it and we can bring it forth to the officer, correct the problem, and fix it for the person as well as for the officer.
Okay, very good. And
can I say something real quick? One thing, and I didn't ask this in the morning session. Is there any newspaper reporter people out here?
You should have brought that up last time.
I sometimes have to be careful. But I never speak from a speech. I always speak from the heart. But I had a newspaper reporter in my office, and all the negative things in the newspaper about law enforcement. This lady asked me, she said, I said, ma'am, I said, if everybody would just comply, they would have their day in court. If we have a warrant for your arrest, you don't have the option of saying, I've got a headache or my back aches, come back tomorrow. We got to arrest you then. And I said, if everybody would just comply, they'd have their day in court. Well, in the News and Observer the next day, what does it say? The sheriff of Harnett County says if the citizens of Harnett County would give in to his demands, everything would be fine. I have never made a comment like that in my life. I don't talk with the newspapers anymore. If I do, I hit an email, send it all out at one time, and they can't say one got it before the other. If they print it, fine. If they don't, that's okay, but at least it's what I said. And those are negative things that you see in the newspaper about law enforcement. So what we ask across this country, not just Harnett County, is if you get a ticket today, or we got a warrant for your arrest and go to get you, don't get confrontational. You'll have your day in court. But I have to be careful what I say because newspapers will spin it off. They are a helpful tool at times when we need somebody that's missing. But otherwise, it's a nightmare. So I have to be careful what I say and how I say it.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that you brought up, Thomas, was the concept of belonging. And Jose has a little brief story about that will lead to the next conversation, next scenario.
Yeah. So one of the things as a Hispanic male that just not with just law enforcement, but just in general, has been that I'm not allowed to live in the house that I live in. You know, I live in a really, really nice house. I drive a really nice car. I own a lot of really cool stuff. And a lot of times, I feel like the viewpoint is that I'm not allowed to have those things because I'm a Hispanic male. Usually the idea is that, you know, I'm at this house to mow their lawn, not because I live there, you know. And so this story happened last summer, and I had been working here at the church, and I had a whole lot of tools. I had large tools. So I had my table saw and, you know, big tools. And so I'm at my house. I'm unloading my tools from my truck, and as I'm unloading my tools, I'm blowing them off and cleaning them off, putting them away, you know, organizing them. And as I'm doing this, a sheriff's deputy parked right at the stop sign right across the street from me and watched me for, you know, about 10 minutes or so, just watched me. And, you know, the whole time I'm just kind of like, huh, that's weird, you know. And then he pulled in and blocked my driveway with his car, got out and started talking to me, and he's like, hey, man, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, you know, a whole lot of nothing, just putting my tools away, you know. And so he, you know, so I asked him how he's doing, and he says, I'm doing good, you know, just checking to see what's going on in the neighborhood, you know. And after he said that, he walks forward, and I have both my garage bays open, and he just like looks around, and I'm like, hey, is something wrong, you know? And he says, no, I'm just looking to see what's going on in the neighborhood. And I'm, you know, at this point, I'm upset because, you know, it's like, this is my stuff. Okay, if I was a thief, I'd be the worst thief in the world because I'm putting it away. I'm not taking it, you know? So at that point, I'm really upset. And so I guess my question would be, in this situation, how can I make it known, number one, that I belong there? And number two, like, how can I be reassured that I'm not just being profiled versus, you know, just checking to see what's going on?
Right. So we as people all want that feeling of belongingness, you know. Pastor Jones talked just a minute ago when he opened up this service about connectivity and sneaking in right when the service was starting and then sneaking out right when the service is ending, and y'all missing that connectivity and then missing that belongingness. And really, that's not just a problem at this church. It's a problem in the community. And it's a problem not only in the community, but with respect to neighbors, but how that community interacts with law enforcement. And so, you know, as it pertains to this case, you know, when I first heard about this incident, there's a lot of unknowns that I don't know. I don't know if the deputy got a call from a neighbor, and the neighbors don't like you. I don't know, you know.
It happens.
Which is possible,
you know.
It's possible.
And we get that. But understand that officers undoubtedly have a standard that they work on, and that's the standard of reasonableness. And so what is depicted here is the officer coming up and observing. And that's what the officer has to go on. His observations, his training, his life experience, any other information that is afforded to him, either from a 911 call or other interactions. So, you know, to observe, and then to come up and to engage in that conversation. You know, one way to feel like that you should explain in utmost honesty, you know, just the raw truth of what's going on. And I think really that's what our community misses a lot of times is things are trying to be sugar-coated instead of just getting down to it and saying, hey, fella, what are you doing? I'm here putting my tools up. I'm a pastor at the local church. Love to have you on Sunday. However you can create that environment. And the officer can do the same thing. These officers that we have working the patrol shifts, they, when available, live in the same zones that they work. And we do that by design. We do that so when they check on and they check off in their car, they're where they need to be when they come to work and they go home at a reasonable amount of time to get back to their families. But the other aspect is these officers answering these calls, they're going to the same churches. They're going to the same grocery stores. Their kids are playing with your kids. They're going to the same parks, the same rec. They're involved. And again, I encourage y'all to reach out to these officers just like we tell the officers to reach out to the community members and build those partnerships, because that's essentially what this is. It's a community partnership between our community and our citizens and law enforcement. And by having those partnerships, we can better work together. We can know one another. We can know what's going on. And we can communicate these things with law enforcement when there's a need.
So part of what I'm hearing is if we get to where we're having more conversations like this so that everybody sees you guys as humans and not uniforms, and then Jose is not feeling targeted, he knows I'm just going over and say hi to the guy and I'm not going to get I'm not going to get tasered for doing it.
Right.
And he knows that's the case, that he's not going to have that.
Right, because one of the things that came out last service was, and I never thought about this because I was so upset about the incident, was that you guys are looking to see how I'm reacting, because I'm unloading tools and putting them in my garage nicely, but you don't know if I stole those tools from somewhere else and I'm unloading them and putting them in my garage. And so that right there, you guys saying that actually made me oh man, that makes way more sense than just you guys were picking on me. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And it's looking at things objectively and not subjectively.
Right.
It's looking at things by matters of fact and not emotion. And so, when you see deputies in your neighborhood, don't jump to the conclusion and think, why is he here? What's he doing? Because ultimately, most of our break-in and enter-ins occur during the daytime, while each of y'all are at work, leaving your home empty and subject to victimization to be broke in. Because thieves don't want to get caught, all right? They don't want to break in while you're there and steal your PlayStation and your TV and your jewelry. They want to do so when it's most likely that they can get away with the crime. So we try to get our officers, when available, when they're not running 911 calls, to ride through and to stop in neighborhoods and do the reports and fill out their civil papers and their returns and all these things, to be seen and to deter. That just that car there deters criminal activity. It may make you nervous, and we recognize that, and that's what we're trying to overcome, but it also makes the criminal really nervous. And that's really the outlook on this by putting marked units out there in that manner, is to deter crime.
One thing I will, and I didn't mention it this morning, as Captain Armstrong just told, we did a study, a graph. The break-ins normally from 8:15 to 1 o'clock, which is basically when most of the people are gone to work and before the kids get home from school. Last year alone, we answered 183,000 calls that came into the 911 center. That's a lot of phone calls. But that's okay. That's what we get paid to do. And what I'm trying to get at is, in your neighborhoods or anywhere, if you see something that looks out of place and you live in your community, if you don't know this person that's there, call us. No matter how small you think it is, he may have just broke in or he's looking to case a place to get it later on. So if you see something out of place, call us that you don't see every day in your neighborhood, because you would be surprised how many crimes that we are solving because of your input. And don't ever feel like that, well, this is minor, he's probably nothing, because it probably was something, because he don't belong or she don't belong in your neighborhood if you don't see them there every day. No officer starts his day wanting to get in a fight or shoot somebody. Trust me, we all want to go home at night to our families just like you want to go home to your families. And we're here to serve the citizens of Harnett County, and we're going to do it to the best of our ability. If you have complaints, my My office, my phone is open 24/7. A lot of times you're going to get Captain Armstrong because I'm out, but I will return your calls, or you come see me anytime you need to.
Just wanted to add, as a person in the military, one of the things I realize is that we're just a microcosm of society. And so although most of us who join the military come with the desire to serve and we're people of honor and integrity, there are some who don't have that same mentality and don't have that same approach. And one of the things that the military is very good about is policing its own, and it is about weeding out those who don't have that military mindset. And although I trust you guys and I have faith that you are the men that you have said that you are today, there's other officers out there who don't look at me the same way and see me as less than human. And so my interaction and my encounter with them is not always the encounter that I would hope that it would be. And so I think it's very important that as a force that it is imperative that you guys also be very active about policing yourselves and correcting actions when people are not treated with respect and dignity.
Yeah, I think that's and I think I'm hoping, and everybody, just thank everybody. I think the panel did a great job, don't you think? And this was a foundation for some more conversation. I hope one of the things that I hope you're seeing. I think you guys can go. I think I caught all my stuff done. Is